The Spin-off Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spin-off's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by The Spin-off with help from Callaghan Innovation. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Big news this week with Fairfax New Zealand, one of the largest and most influential media companies, announcing a new name and CEO. Now to be known as Stuff, the company is to be led by Sinead Boucher. The move was very well received from journalists, happy that a fellow journo and someone from the news side of the news business would be in charge. Recently under Sinead, some of the most successful and exciting multimedia work has been coming from the Stuff stable. You would have listened to Black Hands and might have watched The Valley, showing that quality and innovation are working. And Stuff, the website that ate the company, was built with Sinead as digital editor. All great signs for the bigger business and the workers at Stuff in uncertain media times. To chat about the print business in declining print times, the news biz and her career, CEO Sinead Boucher joins us now. G'day.
Hi, Simon. Hello.
Hey, well, congratulations. Huge role at a pivotal moment. And so cool that it is, if this was a tech company, we'd say that a product visionary is in charge rather than like an accountant.
Thanks. I'm really excited and only mildly terrified. But I love the company. I've worked there for a long time, really enjoyed building up stuff and more lately leading the editorial side of the business. And we are a very editorially driven company. So I'm excited about what the future holds for us.
Cool. We'll jump into kind of like where the company's at the moment, but should we take a little wander back through kind of your career to get here? You started out on that news side of things, and here and overseas, is that right?
Yeah, I started out as a sort of rural reporter for the press in North Canterbury, and great sort of way to cut your chops as a young reporter, doing a bit of everything. And there were a lot of strange cults in North Canterbury at the time, so it was never dull. Then I became sort of a police reporter, a crime reporter, and then headed off to the UK in the sort of, about time of 2000, sort of heading into that sort of millennium, which was that first .com kind of bubble. Therefore making a great time to go and find a job because all the journalists were signing up for startups and things like that. So I was luckily a friend of mine, Jonathan McKenzie, who's the editor at Waikato now, was already working there, and he had been offered a job at the Financial Times on their website, but had decided to stay at the Telegraph where he was, and suggested maybe I should just rock up in his place and try my luck, which is what I did. So I just turned up and said, well, I'm here instead of Jonathan. And the boss there said, okay, come on in, we'll give you a job.
That's great. What did that exposure to the the big market forces around technology, and also working at such a august publication as the Financial Times do
it
for you.
It exposed me to a very good staff canteen. Smoked salmon for the staff every day. But it was incredible because the Financial Times was an amazing organisation, amazing business, and it also just launched ft.com almost as a duplicate of the paper. So they had 400 odd journalists on print, and they decided that meant they needed 400 odd journalists on the web. And kind of mirrored everything. So aviation reporter for print, aviation reporter for the web. So it was, I was very fortunate to sort of turn up at the right time, and was sort of thrown into writing breaking economic news, macroeconomics, whatever sort of was happening, and getting it published on the web. And I found that I just really loved that side of the business. I love the immediacy, even though in those days we're like, right, it's 40 minutes till the top of the hour and we'll publish then, but it still felt very immediate. And just to be able to work in such an inspiring organisation, that definitely gave me a taste for that sort of digital world and that live news environment and what you could build with technology. And
after a couple of other stops, you were able to come back and put that digital experience into practice in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. I'd gone via Reuters as a correspondent for Reuters, and then my husband and I had our first child in London, and we decided to come back to Christchurch, and I went to the press and was given a bit of a job as building up the press website then, which led to being offered the first digital editor role for Stuff. Which at that time was mostly I had sort of 5 or 6 people working for it all together, and was just really a repository for the newspaper content, and maybe some NZPA content, but was not really given any, didn't have any strategy or love given to it in its own right. So a great time to be able to come in and have this this product to get my hands on and to really sort of develop and grow, and all alongside that to kind of try and champion that digital news and digital strategy with the wider Fairfax company.
What was the opportunity there? Like, you know, to not, as you say, just duplicate the newspaper or just be a repository for what's happened. What was your vision for it, and how did it track to that?
I think my vision for it was I could see the potential. It wasn't like the very early days of the internet. There were others overseas doing good things on the web, the likes of The Guardian, etc. And my vision has always been, we can be world class. Why can't we do those things? They're not just because we're sitting in New Zealand. So the opportunity was immense because we had this huge network of newsrooms and journalists around the country, the biggest in the country in terms of that national journalistic might. And we had a platform that was really just starting to come into its own, or had a lot of potential to come into its own. Those were the days when everyone was like, why are we called Stuff? That's so embarrassing. We should be called something august. But, of course, nowadays in the eras of Googles and Twitters and all the rest of it, it's just one of the...
Why did you call it Stuff?
Well, I wasn't part of that original decision, but when Stuff turned 10, we looked back on the initial shortlist, and when the alternatives were deepandwide.co.nz or pavlova.co.nz, I think Stuff was the right choice.
That's really something. And from the get-go, I mean, for people who are maybe Auckland residents, it's very natural to turn on the NZ Herald. But for the entirety of the rest of the country, it's way more natural to turn on Stuff. It's become like the biggest website in the country.
Absolutely. And we've got to the point where, and this is a unique position anywhere in the Western world that we can find, where a news site is the biggest domestic site of any kind in the country. So that gives us enormous opportunity now to think about how we capitalise on that from a business point of view. But huge reach and influence, and definitely sort of level pegging it with the Herald in Auckland now as well.
An interesting thing that Stuff has done compared to maybe drier news sites has been the involvement of the comments and the communities. Tell me a bit about that. Well,
from when I first started at Stuff, what we thought was, because we are a digital-only brand, we had that freedom, like the spin-off actually, to just develop it in the way we thought would be most interesting and relevant to people. And that didn't make us constrained to be just a serious dry news site. nor were we all about clickbait or anything like that. We just felt like, what is the average person interested in? Well, they're interested in a bit of this and a bit of that, and we can be the best of everything. And that community feel, it became clear really quickly to me that the Stuff audience was very loyal and kind of felt a bit of ownership on what we were doing. So the comments, the Stuff Nation contribution platform was our way of sort of fostering that community and making sure there was a big platform for a lot of Kiwi voices.
Yeah, I guess like also that move to user-generated content, which is the big money pot on the internet, because newspapers used to exist. News as a service kind of grew up around the monopoly on classifieds, and that was why newspapers could afford all of this journalism. And going into the new age of media, you do need some kind of money pot to help subsidise things. Was that part of it?
It was not really. It was more about, we've got this big platform with a big reach. How do we open that up to a lot of other people to have their voices and good stories and important things heard? So when we first launched Stuff Nation, there was a lot of chat about, they're replacing journalists with free labour. It was actually nothing to do with that. And if we relied only on user-generated content, well, we would certainly not have the audience that we do now, and that's not why people come to us. But some of those stories have been harrowing, beautiful, inspiring. They're those sorts of first-person people stories, experience stories. One of the ones that really sticks with me was a few years ago. We ran a Stuff campaign about water safety and trying to do, lots of drownings. We wanted to do our bit to try and educate people and highlight this. And this mother wrote in this amazing story about watching her 5-year-old drown in a pool and not realising that was what was happening to him. He was okay. Someone rescued him, but it was such a powerful story. That was one of our top 5 most read stories for the whole year. And
the message there was that they don't actually look like they're panicking. So
that's right. And that was powerful in a way that it could never have been if a journalist had interviewed her and just wrote it. So we see that as part of the whole mix and the whole fabric of what Stuff's all about.
Yeah, mix is a great word there, isn't it? Because, there's the mix between, I guess, the stories about sensational topics or celebrity that get the clicks through to the premium sections. I mean, in a way, there's never been so much great content, but also never so much content that people will be wowsers about.
Yeah, that's right. And, I mean, one of the things that always aggravates me is this kind of insistence that we're about trash news or clickbait or anything, when it's just the furthest thing from the truth. It's not even something that's talked about in any kind of aspirational way in our newsrooms.
You don't put measures on clicks. You don't tell people write stuff that gets more clicks.
No, absolutely not. We talk about, like any good newsroom, about good stories and what serving our audience and holding people to account. But that doesn't mean that all of those stories offset the fact that people are actually interested in reading a live blog of the block and, that sort of stuff. That's what they're all talking about. And the chatter is in life. So we want to reflect that kind of full spectrum of what people are interested in and talking about. But our mission is to kind of serve New Zealanders with journalism that is important to them and makes a difference to their communities. And we do that on a big national level, like with projects like the Valley. But we do it by also being able to have a reporter find out that the West Coast Council had awarded a big contract to a company that had absolutely no experience in that area. So, it's sort of the breadth and scale and depth of our reach that I think is what makes Stuff successful. And also the fact that we don't think we have to be something in particular.
Yeah, having come from stewarding that through being the editorial group editorial chief with all of that, what are the things that then change in your role that you are expanding into as CEO? What are the different, if your challenge before was make the content that is engaging and gets us to number one, what are the challenges now when the role becomes make the money?
Well, I guess that is the challenge now, is how do we ensure we have a business that is sustainable and sustained the journalism that's at the heart of that business. And we've already, the name change from Fairfax to Stuff, which has been signalled, we have to formally implement that in good time to change all the all the things that have to be changed, is about saying, well, now we're a business that is built around the scale of stuff and what that means. And also Neighbourly has grown into a really powerful, it's already sort of number 16th size site in the country, and about diversifying our revenue and what the business looks like. But it all comes back to being able to fund that journalism that therefore brings the audience that all those other businesses can grow off. It's a virtuous circle, but that ability to have that strong New Zealand journalism and that, I guess what we like to think of as a positive, optimistic view of New Zealand is at the core of everything that we do. So my job now is to make sure that the business shifts into a model that's sustainable, that's much more digitally focused, and where revenue is drawn from new areas like Stuff Fibre, for example, our ISP. The thing about Stuff Fibre is people say, why would a media company go into an ISP? Well, it's a subscription business, but it's not a content subscription business, but it's still a subscription business that we use our audience to be able to grow, and the money from that in turn comes back in to fund the newsroom.
Okay, so that let's kind of look at the way that the money flows there. So for something like Black Hands, which has been a huge success all around the world.
2.5 million downloads.
2.5 million
Number
downloads.
one in the UK and Ireland, Singapore, all Australia. Yeah, it's incredible.
How does that commitment, months and years probably of work, lawyers up the wazoo, how does that turn into dollars for you?
I guess we don't think about those projects in terms of how they themselves transpose into dollars, because that's not why you do journalistic projects. You don't do them to see the immediate dollar return. We do those because they are really important stories, and we want to produce world-class work for New Zealanders that they will enjoy and consume and make them think in new formats and new ways. And Black Hands was certainly that. And we've also got a very strong culture around experimentation. And when Martin van Benen and the team were making Black Hands, and we were saying, what would we think would be a successful podcast? What does that look like in numbers or downloads? We had no idea. We probably would have been ecstatic if it hit 10,000, and we weren't making any money directly out of that and didn't seek to. So we just have to ensure that overall we're a strong enough journalistic force with a strong funding base to be able to do the things we really want to do and that are really important.
Yeah, in the past with the model, really strong journalism within a paper would be supported by the ads or whatever else. But in that podcast, it was one of the few podcasts that I've really enjoyed and found such compelling listening that didn't have ads all around it and supporting it. So is that something, if you were doing it over again, would you have popped an advertiser on and said, you pay us by the listener?
I think there were some special characteristics about the subject of that podcast.
Not a lot of brand alignment.
Probably not a lot of brand alignment, but didn't mean it was not a really powerful reader thing. So as a result of that, we have got, we've launched a new podcast initiative internally for our journalists to pitch their ideas, some amazing ideas, and that we will start to make and experiment. And, we're learning as we go along too, and how to make a great audio experience for people. And some of those might be more aligned to advertiser support or sponsor support or something like that. Yeah.
Having been at the lead and in charge of the kind of growth parts of the media business, what are the similarities between being an editor and a project leader to being a CEO? And what kind of stuff have you had to expand from your journalist background as you went through all of those steps of leadership?
So my role at my executive editor role, I've had oversight over 550 journalists and responsibility for not only staff but also all of the newspapers and magazines. So it's been very broad, and it's always had that aspect of growing the new and making the older part of the business work as well as it can, and it's, try and transition our focus into other things. And so that still carries through into broader responsibilities. But essentially, I think I was successful in my editorial role because I had a team of superb editors working around me, and in my executive CEO role, I have a team of superb people leading other parts of the business. My job is to ensure that we're really inspiring and looking after our people, that we set a really clear vision, and that we also stay really true to the values that make up our company, which are quite unique. A business based around journalism has its own ethical framework, its own values about why it's there to serve New Zealanders, and now I have to make sure that they are carried through into the way we do all parts of our business and the new businesses that we get into.
Is there something that you bring from being a journalist? I've found in marketing, business, strategy, finding out things I don't know, that the things that I learned as a reporter have been very useful, such as taking lots of information from lots of sources and trying to work out what's important, or talking to lots of people, or questioning whether what you've got is right all the time.
Absolutely. All of those things I think are really important. So, you and I both know the first thing you learn as a reporter is there's no such thing as a stupid question. Ask the question, and I firmly believe in that, but also that ability to take wide amounts of information and kind of distill them down and stand back and look at what that all means is important.
And if we look at the actual kind of like role that you're stepping into right now as well, it doesn't look like the easiest role in the world to jump into, where you've got the environment where the company was saying it needed to merge to be viable into the future. The Commerce Commission denied that the merger could happen. That's still working its way through the courts. And so you're stepping in. Are you stepping in to make the business work on its own, or to pursue the merger, or what kind of a situation is that?
Well, even through the merger process, it was never a done deal. So we've always been focused on our own strategy and our own plan. And in a merger situation, there are a lot of fundamental things that don't change about what you need to do for the future. The merger appeal will be heard later this year. I don't know how long that will take for a decision. But what we, ourselves and NZME saw was that the merger would give us that, more solid foundation for us to then be able to continue to make the transformation and changes we need to. And particularly it would have offered support to those areas that are harder and harder to sustain in that changing media environment, revenue environment. And that does mean really strong regional journalism and presence in a lot of regions. There was a definite misconception that the merger was going to be about slashing and burning journalists, when actually it was the opposite. It was about being able to forge a business that was strong enough at its roots to continue to support journalism at scale throughout New Zealand. So we do think the Commerce Commission made the wrong call. We understood that they were trying to do that for the right reasons, but that I believe they fundamentally misunderstood how independent journalists and editors are, and that it actually doesn't matter a whit to them who owns the company or who runs it, because they operate as independent forces.
Yeah, it seems to be a very difficult environment where the biggest players driving the change are not subject to the Commerce Commission. Your Googles and your Facebooks and the places that are acting, they're where people consume their media, even if they don't want to call themselves media companies, are the big kind of elephant in the room in that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the frustrations, is that the Commission basically discounted the impact that they had. They might have acknowledged there was an impact on the advertising market, but they didn't see that then had an absolute direct impact on the journalism and the function of journalism and how strong it could be, and therefore the impact on the wider society. We are hopeful around the appeal. We're arguing on points of law. but we'll see what will happen there. But in the meantime, we absolutely have to just, get stuck in and make sure we can do whatever we can to build that sustainable business for the future.
And, that's where the question pops in about things like paywalls, I guess, with every conversation about this time, where some businesses, locally the National Business Review, internationally the Financial Times, have had great success in using paywalls for high quality information you can't get anywhere else. Bloomberg, one of the world's biggest media companies, the same. Is that part of the mix for some of your content?
It's not really a core part of our strategy. And, those companies you've just named, they're all financial news. Most of the revenue from those comes from corporates buying subscriptions rather than individual people wanting to pay for news that's individually relevant to them. For us, all power to the NBR and to others in our country who are making choices about how they are going to fund journalism and their model for the future. But for us, when we look at living in a country of a population of only 4.8 million people, and you start to extrapolate back from, you might have a mass audience in a small country, how many of those people would subscribe and what those payments add up to. On average, around the world, it sort of sits around 2% of your monthly users are prepared to pay to subscribe, even for the New York Times. So those numbers just don't stack up for us against what we could do to use the power of our mass audience around advertising, around showing new businesses and services like fibre, and using those kind of revenues to come back in to fund content rather than making a direct payment. But, like everybody, we watch every development with interest and are right behind in championing the decisions that others are making to experiment and try and make a good business. The other role that Stuff plays that's different, though, I think, to a lot of other media businesses is that we're also a platform. So we're not just a publisher, but we're a platform for other people's content. TVNZ, Māori Television, Newsroom, a lot of others use us now as a way for them to reach their audience or to amplify the reach of their journalism. And we're really proud of that position, and also sort of puts us in a different mindset about what we could do and what that means for our future model as well. So,
the last 10, 15 years that have been fascinating and so much change that you've been right at the front of. The next 15 years with the big media companies using content to bundle, questions of net neutrality, questions of duplication of services. It's a fascinating time to be owning a fibre company. And is that part of the ISP equation, that if you are able to bundle all of these services into a subscription model?
Possibly one day, absolutely. But we're still sort of in that process of building up what our new digital businesses and services might be, and that will be a big part of the next several years. I look ahead to the next 3 or 4 years, and I think they are going to bring even more profound change and transformation for all of us than the last 10 years. And, we've been through this wave of digital disruption, and now we're facing that next bigger wave, I think, of disruption around things like AI, what that will do, not to our industry, but to the way society works and to jobs and to, the headwinds are by no means behind us or even close. I think one thing we've got really good at doing is adapting to change and realising there is no point hand-wringing and looking back on the good old days and the rivers of gold of classifieds. You just have to be firmly focused on what's ahead and making sure you're reading the signals and seeing what are going to be the big things around change and disruption coming at us in future.
Oh, what a fascinating time to be stepping into that role. Thank you so much for such a great wide-ranging chat today. Sinead Boucher, who is the new CEO of Stuff, formerly Fairfax New Zealand.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much to Jose Barbosa for coming out to the Fairfax soon-to-be Stuff offices to record today. And thank you very much for listening. If you'd like, get in touch on Twitter at Simon_Pound.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. And brought to you by the spin-off and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.